Hello, today I want to show you a gadget I whipped up that has improved my sharpening experience. I started out years ago sharpening on carborundum oil stones. I had a mismatched set of a bunch of different sizes and grits that I have accumulated over the years and was quite happy with them. A few years ago, somebody gave me a gift certificate to Woodcraft, and I thought, what the heck, I'll try one of these lovely DMT diamond plates. And I was hooked. They are flat, they are level, they don't seem to wear at any appreciable rate, so they're perfect for me, and I started acquiring more of them. As I said, I love them, but there's a couple of small issues with them. The first is that they're smooth and slippery, which means that you have to hold them down with one hand to use them. Put them on a smooth surface, they walk all over. You could get some rubber for a backing for them, and that would solve the problem. But the other one, and it's more concerning for me, is just how thin they are. For me, it ends up being a knuckle buster. If I'm working on the surface, there's no clearance. So what I did was came up with a riser for these stones that fits on the edge of my workbench. Something like this, and screws into an insert . But if you're going to do a bunch of sharpening, you find yourself putting one stone in, taking it out, putting the next stone in, taking it out. So I decided to line the entire workbench with a bunch of these. And I'll show you how I made these. I always have a bunch of oak 1x2 scrap on hand, so that's what I use to make these riser blocks. Each one uses two pieces each of 8-inch, 6.5-inch, 4-inch, and 2.5 inches. Start with all of these about 1/8 of an inch too long to allow for trimming to final size after laminating. I laid up the laminations on the surface of my table saw using machinist's 1-2-3 blocks to keep things square and in line. The inside of the riser is the most important bit, so let any length or height disagreements end up on the outside. The glue squeezed out on the inside of the block can be cleaned up with a chisel and scraper. The outside of the block was cleaned up on my stationary sander. These blocks are cleaned up and brought to their final dimension. I used an 1.5-inch Forstner bit set to overhang the edge to cut a finger hole that will make the plates easier to remove from the riser. The short side of the block gets a 3/8 through hole for a mounting knob. The diamond plates will be held in with 1-inch strips of brass around the top. Any thin sheet metal would do, even a piece of wood molding. The advantage to metal is that the fit can be adjusted slightly by bending the strips in or out as needed. I didn't have 1-inch stock on hand, so I used my shear to break down a large sheet I had. I rounded the upper corners of all the strips with a file. This isn't really necessary, but it does help to avoid hand injuries. Clearance holes for the round-headed screws are drilled in all the brass strips. You need to make some sort of hold down or jig for this operation if you are using brass. It's really grabby stuff and can turn into a meat saw if it gets away from you. The strips are attached to the sides of the blocks with just a bit less than 1/4 of an inch overhang. This keeps the strips below the surface of the mounted diamond plate. And here's what that looks like. You could just bolt these blocks to your workbench with whatever you have on hand. That's what I did with the prototype, and I used it for over a year. When I set out to make this batch, I decided to turn some knurled knobs. I chucked up a piece of leftover 1-inch bar, The first step was to make a 1/4 inch stud and a 1/2 inch collar for some clearances for the knurled section. I knurled the head and threaded about 3/4 inches of the stud. The knobs will be used with these large fender washers. With the blocks finished, it's time to secure them to the bench. For that, I drilled the face of the bench for threaded inserts using the blocks as a guide. I experimented a bit and found that 8 inches between the blocks was about right given the small space I had to work with. I've been using this for a couple of months now and I'm quite happy with it. I did keep a few of my best oil stones. They now live in 3x8 inch blocks of their own and can be used in these riser blocks as well. I hope this project gives you some ideas for your shop. Thanks for watching.